Sora Lexon, and this is Magic Lesson 101, Spring Equinox. But first, I have to give a shout out to the people at VR Mystery School. I find myself in private messages so often recently when people are asking, where can I go to hang out with other occultists and these sorts of things, especially online as technology becomes pervasive. I find myself recommending the VR Mystery School again and again, even if you don't have virtual reality. So what they are, it's amazing. They've created an actual virtual reality, a school where people can just come together. And, there's a library and there's a building you can walk around in virtual reality, and you can attend lectures and book readings. It's this amazing thing. And like so many things, occult or occultist, it's being passed forward in this very profitless way by a few individuals that took it on as their calling to provide this sort of forum and structure for the public to partake in if they so chose. So I got to give them a shout out. They do say like a live lecture, a live book reading on something like The Rising of Prometheus. And then they'll upload that pre-recorded live session from virtual reality to YouTube. So you can watch these videos on YouTube. You can look up VR Mystery School and you can go listen. And these are wonderful lectures. These are people coming together and asking questions and exploring, their occult heritage and their spiritual heritage and all of these things. So it's great. There's discussions on different forms of meditation and book readings. And I can't get enough of these guys. So you know how you know a real occultist when you meet them, right? They're the ones that aren't interested in just showing off their own ego endlessly, as their identity. You can't get further from that in VR, right? Everyone's an avatar. And they're the ones giving something back, just anonymously doing this endless work to pass it forward. So I have to mention them because I find myself recommending them so often. I feel like there's probably listeners who, maybe in a down moment when they have a down beat, rather than scrolling, might want to go check that out. Be around others, especially if they're lone practitioners, in a comfortable, safe, and secure way, and being a part of those forums, and listening to them and being part of that community. So, and I have to give a quick shout out to the person whose order from Lux Occult Supply got swapped with an order from another business that I'm helping someone with. And they have been patient and wonderful and are mailing the merchandise back to me so that it can be, resent to the person it was meant to go to. It's not even one of my direct businesses. It's a small personal Etsy business that I'm helping someone get off the ground. I try to do that when I can. I try to make myself available to people. One of the skills of the occult that can be very useful to others when trying to maybe begin resource income is the ability to understand an object in its entirety just by touching it. So knowing, say, the year it's from and who owned it previously. If you're doing something like needing knowledge about items, an occultist can be very helpful in that way. So I've been helping someone with this other business. It's a little baby business. They're just trying to get off the ground. And anyway, that business's package, the addresses got swapped with a Lux Occult Supply package, and the person who received the package in error has just been amazingly patient and kind and willing to ship the merchandise back again, which is incredible. So I have to say thank you to them, along with thank you for keeping one of my little secrets, one of my more legally public names, right? So you have access to one of these other businesses. I remember at some point you said, now I'm interested. Now I want to know about what other businesses you have. That one's actually not mine. It's one I'm helping someone with. But I do have others, and I appreciate you keeping that cross-indexed information, to yourself. It's amazing to see the difference in how individuals from the occult respond to, wonderful obstacles that strengthen them, with patience and gratitude and kindness and all of these things. One could say versus, the person who received their Magick package in Utah, the response from them, far different. But I won't get into the details of that. So thank you. Thank you to the person who's helping me work out that completely accidental, completely my fault, mismanaged order. To get back to the spring equinox, I have to say to everyone, I think there's over 1,000 subscribers on this tiny little channel. It's amazing. Blessed, effervescent, resplendent equinox, spring equinox to all of you. Maybe you call it the vernal equinox, the new year. This is not a diminutive difference of terms applied, by the way. The authentic, genuine new year versus just maybe calling it an equinox. But in common parlance, the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, there are many occult traditions that denote the spring equinox as the true new year and the most sacred day of the calendar year, the most powerful midnight of the calendar year, when all the best celebrations are held, whether you're jumping over a fire or stringing colorful ribbons around a pole, or bringing home goldfish to seed your pond, or seeing off dead souls in a meditative trance-like state. So it's a day of rebirth. A day ago, to you all, because I'm recording this actually on the 22nd, and it would have been the 21st, the 20th. So it's usually on the 20th or the 21st every year. The day Stonehenge marks the rising sun with its monoliths. If you've ever been there and attended those beautiful celebrations and rituals, the new year, very important. When the plane, scientifically, to bring some ration and logic to those who so adore those things as we explore the natural world, which is not a non-magical concept. So when the plane of the Earth's equator passes the center point of the sun, think about that for a second. So the plane of the Earth's equator, so that circle that runs around the Earth, right? But the plane of that as if it were bisecting the sphere of the planet, where that point passes the center point of the sun. So it's approximately, again, March 20th or 21st each year. It's the time when day and night are equal or just about equal, as close to equal as they get for the entire planet at the same time. The entire planet will have an equality of day and night on the vernal equinox and spring equinox. So kind of a big deal. Think about the implications of that, the unity involved. And then, of course, you have the summer solstice, June 21st, the fall equinox, September 20th, 21st, sometimes 20th, right? Winter solstice, December 21st, all over the world. It's the spring equinox that's recognized as a day of rebirth. It's a high holy holiday for most people involved in magic or occultism of any kind. It's a very powerful day and very useful to us. There are ancient structures all over the world. If you can think of a continent or a place, there's likely a burial mound or a pyramid of some form or a wooden structure of some form that has the intention of being aligned with the great equinox's spring sunrise. In Egypt, in Ireland, in Greece, it doesn't matter. They're everywhere. You might not know all of them, but they're everywhere. The Eleusinian mysteries, built around, well, not really built around the spring equinox. It's almost more like the spring equinox is built around the great mysteries. But that origin season story. So these are the things I think about when I think about the spring equinox, the public shallow symbol phase, not to be, in brevity and brief, to be too brief, but where Persephone gets wifed up by Hades because she eats 6 pomegranate seeds and so has to spend 6 months in hell, in Hades, with Hades, that's his namesake of his realm, with him, and only gets to spend the other 6 months upstairs, on the mortal plane, on the material temporal plane, surrounded by the bounty of the material with her mother, Ceres, Demeter, again, where that word cereal derives from, that wheat of Demeter of Ceres. So it's this beautiful day when Persephone leaves the cold of Hades' side, where she's trapped in death and in hell, and treks back up to the earth, where her mother rejoices at her presence. And so all life, because she is the child of the mother of life, all life springs back into joyous action. So the swaying golden wheat fields jump up to greet Persephone's feet, right, as she treads towards her mother, because it is her mother who controls such things. And so that vitriolic cold winter of her mother's grief subsides, replaced by the growth of divine spring, divine rebirth. So, and this is from a Greco-Roman tradition. There are others. They tell the same story in the same ways. And they just get passed forward again and again. This concept of sacrifice and rebirth, right? So that's the top layer public optics interpretation of the whole thing, which isn't an anomaly in the occult. Keeping things shallow, wading pools safe for the many, and deeply, possibly dangerous, diving pool depth for the few. Not an uncommon thing when we discuss magic. Anyway, the Eleusinian mysteries built around that, or one could say built into that, or of that. There are deeper symbolic implications. Don't know if you've studied these mysteries at all. Maybe consider doing so. I find that eventually anyone along the great path is going to be drawn forward to these mysteries at some point. Important to occultists, to say the least. When we discuss the Eleusinian mysteries, even in a general way to the uninitiated, there is always a breathtaking, obvious confluence of themes involved. And there's an overt a reason for that, that the very great mystery school traditions have presented and represented themes to the public, of necessity. So regardless, how to articulate this? So whether we were tricked or forced into hell, you might conceive of it that way, whether perhaps you believe we chose it, that we threw ourselves into the hell realm, maybe after the great shatter, the great fracture, maybe to comfort the mirror image we saw reflected in the material, as source pushed itself into that realm, winging down to hell on purpose to comfort the souls trapped there, maybe in a blissfully innocent or naive attempt to brighten things up in the dark, so that the light peering into that dark might be able to see some of itself. Again, there's a lot of versions of this story. I don't want to sound too erudite about it, because everyone has their own intimately close and personally unique interpretation of these things. And very often, until you're initiated into some of the greater concepts, it's simply going to depend on what occult background you happen to be hailing from in that moment. And that might change from you. You might come to a deeper understanding of it. You might decide that even though you're from that background, this is your new, deeper understanding of it. So depending on which magical background and tradition you're coming from personally, the Persephone story is either going to have her abducted, kidnapped by Hades, forced against her will, or has her choosing of her free will to go into Hades' realm for one reason or another, or has her lacking all lucidity, just ignorantly opting into this pattern of events without realizing that she's doing so at all. Each version creates a different symbolic dynamic of backstory about our movement away from and back to, code words here, source energy, the divine, the all, the light. So the Eleusinian mysteries are thick with these greater contexts and meanings. and very tied up in the spring equinox, the deeper hidden occulted truths behind the public tales and myths of Greek deities and their exploits, and just allowing the public to see this story as a representation of the change in the seasons. Depending on what you think about it, you're going to derive different implications from it. So you had to be initiated in the Eleusinian mysteries. You had to be initiated, or you have to be initiated, into the ranks in order to begin to comprehend and see and hear some of these deeper stories, these deeper truths, to perceive the tale as it really is for what it is, right? A star and a logo of a company is not just a star and a logo of a company. Right? Every magician knows that. So, and this game, it doesn't change. Nothing new under the sun. We're still here plugging away in the same ways we have been since back then and previous to then. So we were here first, and, by choice then we'll also be the last. The part of the tale where Zeus has to be convinced to rule in Persephone's favor. So she's trapped in hell, and Hades doesn't want to let her go. And her mother comes forward, Demeter comes forward, and goes to her brother Zeus and says, I need your help. I need Persephone out of hell. I want my daughter back. I want to spend time with my daughter. But he has to be convinced to do this. So this rebirth itself, bringing all life back, that's not a good enough excuse for divine intervention. The holism of all life has to bring material nature itself to its knees. Right? There's no green lion yet, so you just shut the whole show down in darkness and freezing cold, right? It's not a pleasant thing. It's not a pleasant experience. The initiative, draft of ambrosia can't be produced because wheat isn't being grown. So, all in order so that this one brighter aspect of power can then be forced to realize the necessity of helping out with this endeavor, to be on the side of bringing the new ruler back from the dead and allowing for this resurrection. Wheels within wheels of comprehension, layers of symbolic meaning. Demeter has to force Zeus abusively by damaging all of Zeus's creation and understood reality in order for Zeus to intercede and say that Persephone, yes, should get at least 6 months topside so that all life can be renewed. It's not a small thing, the spring equinox or the stories around it. So, sometimes the divine feminine, you'll find it encased in ways you never conceived of. Perhaps in a story about a patriarchal, egoic god aspect of self, not wanting to help out a mother goddess in returning her child life to the world. But it worked, right? These stories worked culturally. People still know Zeus's name. It ran the culture and society then. The deeper truths did get passed forward. Did Greeks really think that this guy, quote unquote, like this masculine deity form, which wasn't a guy at all, even as they described it, right? So usually just depicted as a forceful, masculine power energy, a creative, enforcing energy. When we talk about the occult, we talk about the polarities of feminine and masculine energies, right? Often portrayed in bestial form. Zeus is often portrayed as an animal. Did they think the priests talked about this aspect, this patriarchal aspect, about him turning into an animal? And he was known for raping women, right? He would become a swan and rape a woman. He would become a bull and rape a woman. He was constantly kidnapping women. He was constantly kidnapping the feminine. So, but this was how it was portrayed in this very violent and aggressive way. Does anyone think that the great mysteries, portrayed Zeus that way because they adored the concept of patriarchy inside of their societies and the subversion of the feminine in world cultures to where they had to constantly and consistently hide greater truths under the surface of all things, right? So because just on the surface You got to admit, whether it's a high Greek, Roman priest, or druid, it seems like the stories convey a different sort of assessment of who and what Zeus was in comparison to who many of the feminine forms were, if you know how to read between the lines. So then you get these other hidden correspondences cross-culturally, like in the Kabbalah, the Sephiroth mysteries, the great mysteries of the Sephiroth, where the order of all creation is portrayed as the lightning flash, right? This lightning flashes, sparks shower. In one blink of your eyes, you've missed seeing. It's a quote from a whole nother culture, but it's the same thing, the famous zigzag bolt. Again, often corrupted as so many symbols of power are, but still the zigzag moving through the four worlds of divine emanations, that from Ayin Sof comes forth of the long face. And then to quote, right, within his skull exist daily 13,000 myriads of worlds which draw their existence from him and are by him upheld. Right. So when we hear this word him, think code word. Didn't Zeus and all his siblings as well spring forth from Kronos' cracked skull, right? The skull splits open and time reveals unto itself these fractured facets of different divine beings. So if they aren't origin themselves, these gods, if they came from somewhere, just specifically talking about these Greek god forms, it's probably something more powerful above them, right? When we see this displayed in cultures, we know that those cultures have an understanding of that. I always find it funny. I know so many wonderful school teachers, many of whom, of course, we're all occultists, but some of us haven't acknowledged it yet, right? The occult is working with us despite ourselves, but they're not occultists. When we talk about, being aware of the greater mysteries or of the divine or of magic or of having access to it, I know so many school teachers that are not occultists, and it's so, I want to say funny, but also in a way heartbreaking when they teach Greek myth and history, whether at, a grade school level, say a higher school level, or the college level, even so much emphasis on how the Greeks believed these pluralistic deity forms were God. Of course they didn't think that. Look at how their pantheism is structured. Whether consciously or subconsciously, there wasn't a Roman senator alive, likely, who, one, wasn't initiated into the great mysteries, better chances than not, but who, two, even if they didn't manage that, via rubbing shoulders and associative politic networking with those that were, most were, but who didn't think to themselves, if Zeus and Hera and all these other gods live in Olympus, then Olympus itself must be somewhere or inside of something else, part of a greater whole. And if those gods, quote unquote gods, were ripped out of Kronos' head, where did Kronos come from? It's kind of how these lesser corruptions of teachings talk about Egyptians worshiping multiple gods, like that they were just, nonsensically convinced that all of these little power deities had control of their lives. Please, if there was any society on earth that was deeply philosophically of a massive spiritual bent, it was ancient Egypt. Of course it was. Does anyone really believe that those citizens and, of course then those high priests of higher initiatory ranks, the pharaohs and the pharaonic families and houses and the great royal roofs didn't beg the deeper questions or have some understanding of them? I'm not saying that there weren't general stories, as there are today, fed to the population about basic ethics and moral values to live one's life by in order to structure and keep society healthy, happy, and progressive. But as you see, widely disseminated in religions today, right? We do the same thing now. Again, for those who supposedly can't or won't come into an understanding of the greater truths, and we're trying to keep cultures and societies functioning. But that doesn't mean those greater truths aren't there, or that in Egypt they weren't there, or that in Greece they weren't there, and in use and understood. Of course they were. These are the things the spring equinox makes me consider. So imagine 5,000 years from now, a history class is being taught in a very futuristic school, likely in a purely energetic format, or like virtual reality. And it's getting taught about how current resident geographic culture of my area. So again, I'm already being grossly shoved by history into a mislabeled box, not as a citizen of the world, but as one individual citizen under the direct influence of, say, just North American thinking and politics. Awesome. As if we're all that. And then the teacher says to the students of 7022, on this spaceship where their software has been uploaded and their minds are free to roam the utopic realms of VR, that maybe the singularity has come, maybe not. I don't know what's going on in 7022, but a class is being taught, and this is the class that I and everyone else around me believed in a white man with a beard who sat on a cloud and had a kid whose blood everyone, including me, symbolically drank because they thought it made them pure. Right? So, and again, imagine that concept to maybe people that are only energetic VR forms, even considering being in a material format as a necessity, like how stupid we would seem to them, how ignorant, and then thinking that these oddball things were somehow our forms of worship or belief. It doesn't take much to get there mentally that it's ridiculous. It's almost obscene. Right? We have, the teacher would be saying, we have historical evidence that this quote unquote Christianity was predominant in the thinking of all the citizens of quote unquote North America in 2022, and that they all believed, and this sort of ceremony and this odd belief structure is what they knew and lived their lives by generally. And this is what was disseminated by the highest power structures at the time. See, that's nonsense. That is what they would think, and that is possibly what they would teach. But as above, so below. If that's how I'm to be described in 7022 and ages to come, how must I assume those of ages past were being described to me? Exactly. If nothing else, let us ever be, especially during the rebirth of the spring equinox, let us be more resourceful and astute in our stewardship of comprehensions of history and the future, which, whether it's historic or future, in many ways, in more than one way, very much the same thing. We tend to have a ubiquitous lean as a species towards failing to notice our own narrow perspectives, to seeing our own blind spots. We're staring ever at the tree and entirely ignoring the broad horizon of forest. That's kind of what, if we're going to make a general statement about human beings, that should be the general statement, that we're very prone to that. Anyway, getting back to the Eleusinian mysteries, I know I go on tangents. Forgive me, friends. Forgive me for my tangents. Whether you're using Egyptian symbols or Greco-Roman symbols or modern Christian symbols, the lesser and greater mysteries of the Eleusinian mysteries, which have a great deal to do with the spring equinox, to put it far too glibly, required the knowledge of occult keys, that is, secret keys of understanding that gave the composed, the steadily self-possessed initiate greater insight. And, almost the entirety of the lesser rites. I can't say too much about it here. I can't get into specifics, but it's all about the abduction of Persephone while she's picking meadow flowers. And yes, on the shallow end of the mental wading pool, this is reflective of the progression of seasons symbolically, making, among other things, the spring equinox is symbolically transportative or transformative, massively powerful event in the telling. Just its alignment with the changing of the seasons as a story is a very powerful thing. even if you're not an initiate, into the greater truths. So in another way, being alive here, right? Picking those daisies very much means you're dead somewhere else, if you stop to consider it. Just as, Psyche, Persephone, is dead, the soul, when she's in hell, until she returns to Ceres, to Demeter, to the mother of all, to the all, and so is alive. So, what's sacred to Demeter, along with wheat, is the poppy, right? I don't want to get into drug use of ancient Greeks, but there are obvious things at work here. The very word mystic is from the Eleusinian mysteries, where an initiate of the lesser rites would come through, the trials, the travails of hell. Literally, in physical form, they were forced to go through an initiatory practice. And once understanding the great secret of this statement, the living are ruled by the dead, there is a great secret to that statement. If you want to meditate on something, consider meditating on that. What could it mean in greater context, in greater symbolism, right? So then they would receive the honorary title Mystes. That's what a lesser rite initiate who had come through the lesser rites of the Eleusinian mysteries would be called a Mystes. This is where the word mystery, mystic comes from, right? And of course, there's much, much more to all of that. Seek it out. If you would, right? If you will, if you will. Magic is a vast realm. The occult is a vast, a beautifully immaculate, immortal realm. So, but still, dawn and midnight of the spring equinox, very important, very powerful. May you be filled with its light and transformative energies. If you did not have a chance to indulge yourself of the great high holiday, and you're looking for maybe a way, magically, or a little informal ritual, consider going outside, and in a clean, safe way, consider putting your ear to the ground. So maybe not, over an anthill, but in a peaceful, serene quietude, as you relax in a cloudless, gentle moment, simply listen and allow yourself to align with the presence of all that surrounds you. You won't be the first to do such a thing. It may not be the full initiate, lesser ritual, high ritual practice of the Eleusinian mysteries, but it isn't so far removed as to be unuseful to the ardent magic practitioner. Keeping an ear to the ground, like so many other things, didn't pass into the vernacular of the main and many, because we didn't intend it to, after all. Until next time.